Welcome everyone, this is General AI. Welcome to Flight Navigation's Gate 53, where we come in and track lines of communication and settings, release and identification to a system, come in all levels into arrivals and departures. We have to really start identifying our systems, how can we modify. Getting communication lines, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface is really standing the Earth. Our setting the correlations and track location has its ground lines, its runways, and travel calculations to its highways. How to use that through OCalc modify puts everything into positional process. Okay, we're going to start off in communication setting. I'm going to show you exactly what's happening in conversion with the Earth line rotation surface and how it comes into its own gravitational pull and how it synergizes its calculation setting to its part accelerators. Track to its communication lines is an open signal, open panel, and track location to its system. Also, welcome new viewers and line rotation that's already here in instructions. You correlate to calculate and modify. The more you go to school, the more you understand navigation and pre-flights. Getting direct signals, the team can help you out in all ways and forms. Feel free to just sit back and just have fun. That's what it's all about in calculation of the inner child. The inner child is direct signals into exactly what it is in the calculation setting. The body is line conditions, more control, and use your system location, seeing yourself through a plasma screen. Directs lines and modification lines, puts all communication setting through operation lines of surface. All that communications comes in calculations. Let's go to the center core system of the Earth. And we're going to have direct line signals and location to its system. All lines are calculation lines. Snowy graph interference, black and white, right? Black and white line communication, screen lines, adaptation line interference, and correlation line calculation, modified lines and locations, right? Setting correlation lines are high calculate, modifieds. ILs are correlation lines. 6 lines can high center, the interference location of 6A, right? Seating and arrangements and line combinations. All levels of travels, 3 line signals and line rotation surface interactions. Direct lines at 1 center, 1 operation, 1 surface, 1 track location, right? Direct lines, center core system and travel position of motion. Direct calculation lines and triangulation line communications position of program. Now we're going to go through 1 signal, 2 lines, 3, 4, 5, 6 in set locations and travel. Point lines of graph calculation line center interference. Now go with the ground line setting, crop circle lines in 1 line, rotation surface, and track location. Direct modification lines and cloud line screens. And go with communication lines, galaxy shift line calculation, screen location, adaptation lines of surface. Position process. Specification lines of high calculation flux. Line conditions, high center interference, and barometers, thermometers, lines of thermal. Direct modification lines of cycles. Trying to integrate the scene lines, high calculation setting, and travel positional levels. Navigate the screen lines, high center, flight command centers. Position of process, calculation setting. Console communication lines at 3 alignment panels. Travels lines at 1, 2, and 3 track locations. Direct lines at 5, 6, 7, and 8 line communications of programs. Direct modification lines of cyclonism, line rotation cycles, lines and security line, position of 1 center, 2 center, and 3 track location provision. 3 correlation setting of track lines set to the part of accelerator, round system correlation lines attractions, going around the set lines high center interference, all lines of clock line in line rotations in set location of clocking calculation, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Positions of the process correlates to communication lines, 1/5, 1/8, 1 setting, 1 line rotation, 1 center, 1 correlation, 1 tractions. Direct modification, high line connection, high information, screen lines, adaptation, navigation, screen location, high center. Operation line cycles, set of particle accelerators and screen line adaptation locations, 3 billion line cycles. Sets communication line and habitation zone line communication, high center interference of 24. Sets communication. You guys are there, and set like it's 24 over lines of 7 adds line position of 8. Sets lines of communication lines, 7 bodies of water, track lines of 25 over 7. Track lines calculation setting. Team line comes in, track lines calculation high interference, platitude lines at 24, 48, 72. Set lines of 144. Platitude screen lines, adaptation lines, set location system, and travel. Point lines, graph calculation lines, 12 billion cycles, Earth habitation zone, and 2 line communication setting. 2 airports lines of 3 billion, track location line, calculation setting, travels, but position lines of 12 billion cycles, and line position location calculations. Line and high interference, 30 line seconds, minutes on the clock, high calculation, hours, and line conditions of pi. Have fun interaction. All right, direct modification line signals. Position is process calculation, screen lines. So you guys are given a tour in line communication setting, you know exactly what's going on in line communication system through arrivals and departures. Now, clocking system through back in time is trying to understand how to go through line signals and rotation. Process calculation of line screens is knowing exactly how to go through surface line calculations. Now, direct lines modification, 1 signal, 1 rotation surface. Position of process is understanding how to go through a half pipe. Half pipe, line settings, all line rotation surface interactions. Direct lines of centers. position of process of 1, and position of process of 2, and position of process in 3 track location. Direct modification lines, a center core system, all levels, high correlation lines of attractions, all communicate to position of its program and center calculation. Okay? All right, so getting the position lines of centers put you guys into our calculation. Now we're going to use the flux. So we go through Y lines, we go through flat surface, that indicates 1 alpha, 1 delta, 1 operation, 1 center, 1 communication, 1 interference, 1 AI, and position your CPU and line track locations. Direct lines of C, positions of P, and unification, 3 triangulation line screens. Alpha line tone, line set locations in omega. Process of film strips is a 3-track location provision. We take the Y line center, we have the green line screens, so it's communication of its position of its program. Size correlation line calculation setting. Set location. Mapping sequence lines, center correlation. Cross line signals, high position process. Line signals, high correlation setting. 3 set location calculations. Now, directing lines of panels, green line cycles, green line circles, and green line communications position its program on set location of center. Process calculation lines is coloration lines of highest interference, putting line communication settings of 2 tractions, 2 divisions, and 2 line rotation. Fluid comes in, line signals, rotates the surface, and track communication line condition setting and process calculation. Now, the process communication setting comes into a blue line cycle. Sets communication lines surface, 1 center, and rotation set locations. Direct lines modification at 3 levels in line rotation. Track positions of pi. So we go through 1/5, 1/8, 1 setting, 1 traction, 1 division, 1 rotation, 1 correlating, high calculate setting, a cobwebbing. Direct modification lines of signals. Now we go through line communication setting. X2000 comes in and track application line system. Process communication. Sets correlation lines of highest interference. Cross lines comes back in center, operates the signals, operates the center, operate the circuits, and set location of travel. That my question, right? The center communication line setting is the process of yin and yang. How to use that through transition is all through calculations, right? So we go through the 1 line centers of formation lines equals lines. EVA has landed in line condition setting. All right, so E lines of highs and levels. We got ozone line rotations, 1 line condition equals lines at ground level. Communication lines cross line signals into 1/2 pipe line signal and position of routers and routers and line condition setting to its position of its program. Direct calculation lines of formation lines of 2 waving panels, 1 equals lines of correlation, E lines and highest interference, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 settings, and circulation, rotation, surface, and track location. All right, done by equation. Setting communication on the router lines is understand the portals, stargates, and line communications. Now, the communication lines of the Earth is at 24 tractions, and line send high interference into 144 and track location and settings and tractions, right? Set lines of species and set lines of team track location, right? Split lines anomaly, line rotations, in-line communication to its position of its program. This is a transition of platform. Transition is a platform for set locations, right? Sets communication lines of existence and set location of planes and non-existence and set location of planes. 2 track line provision lines, the Earth line rotation surface and track location. Ground line centers, operation lines of surface. Platitude screen lines into all calculation setting to the blue, the green, and the line communication setting and travels. Ground center operation lines of service. Color the screen lines adaptation. Let's go through the blue water sequence. 8 waters line screen highest interference. 7 position programs, direct lines, modification line cycles, generate the screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. 7 bodies of water, 8 lines of triangulation line positions program, and infinity line rotation center. Track 2 is communication line calculation setting, since all levels are green. Forestry communicate line interference in alchemy, correlates the track interference and travel and point graph communication setting, indirect line signals, modification system of travel. Point centers calculation line interference. We go into the brown line centers that communicates lines of Earth. Mother Earth track location line position travel, point lines of graph communication setting, operate the cycles and generate the screen location setting and habitation zone attraction. Done by equation, right? All right, so the center core system has a center up setting. That's a router line rotations in 1 cycle, 1 generation screen in 1 set location, 1 center. Travel right away. Let's do it again, right? You got to catch it, right? Travels lines, signal lines, modification 1 cycle. Sets communication line crosses lines of 2 cycle and line rotation. Sets communication lines and cycles, generate the screen, generate the operation line service, sonar, and line communication setting and travel. Points lines and graph calculation, all right? Now we go through line signals. We change the orange lines, green lines, the Fibonacci line screens, high center interference at high positions. Change communication grounds, high center interference, and 3 triangulation lines, split lines anomaly. Position lines over power. Power generate line communication factors over pi. XT1001, XT1003, XT1004, XT1008, and XT1012 in traction. Direct modification line signals, 1 center line in rotation, 1 center correlation, 1 traction, 1 calculation setting in position of flywheels and traction. Direct modification line signals, all levels of correlations, coloration lines of patterns, coloration line communications, pattern lines of 1 in travel line rotation surface, and a blue line angles and line condition setting of its program. Now we can skip lines anomaly, line rotation centers, back in time, back in correlation, back in travel. Position lines, high interference, infinity line rotates the cycles, generate discrete lines, adaptation line interference, cancel out communication setting, position of its program, communication accelerator. Directs modification lines of clouds, generate these communication lines, high interference. We go through security lines in a 3-line panel, position line of its program, location setting, and travel correlation setting attractions. Direct calculation lines, we'll go through the green line setting, height and location system, travel point lines and graphs, positions of its process. Now that puts all communication setting into center operation lines of service. Cloud line change, direct lines modification, code moving, code activation lines, high center interference, and high positional levels, and tracking lines of provision. Direct calculation lines, set location, ground lines, go communication lines back into blue. Sets lines, communication lines, high center interference, and water containment, certification, acceleration lines, communication setting, and position all levels. Canceling out in line rotation surface attractions. Direct lines modification, the ground lines. Go through ground line rotation surface and calculations. Ground center, line rotation center, zero gravity, line communication, 5 measure, correlation setting, and track location system. Done by question, right? That's the accelerator going back in time. All right. Illumination graphs is a correlated attractions. It directs lines of modification. It gets very complicated with team now. They understand the pattern lines and high interference into metric meters, scales, correlation setting calculations. So that puts lines, we started off the I-924. That's the individual line screen high interference of 9 line centers, high correlation set of 24 line communications. That's where we are through attractions. The activation screen line opens up the signal lines of modification to its VR system, to the AVR, to the CGI communication of CGI communication at green screen, and communication of CGCI. That puts all communications in position of programs in direct line signals and modification line conditions. So we got a goal line cycle, line center, a center communication position of its program. Directs modification line signals, line conditions of center and communication of its program. Directs calculation lines, ground lines, earth line rotation surface, communication line condition position of its program. That way equation, right? 3 central line communication setting high interference. Triangulation line, split lines anomaly, line positional levels, and Merkabah triangle line communication position. Textual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. In line position of 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, 23, 24 set locations. That way equation. That's all set up. All right, so center communication setting is all levels of travel. We're going to take positional lines of patterns, direct modification lines of calculations. So I'm going to show you how you go back in time through a 25 cycle. Understand how to use your flux, but you have to cancel out the number sequence, that position, location, and line condition setting. So it's like a train has a caboose. So we start with the caboose, then we start with the train. Caboose first, right? So that's communication of direct. That's directing lines that goes back in time. So that's correlations. And then we redirect signals into applications, right? So we cancel out everything line condition setting. So let's say in a 26,000 line set location, it is 7 sequence. Sets position lines at highest interference. Set core line centers or tracking lines at highest interference and direct signals. Sets communication lines at 13 tractions and direct lines and position location at 30 settings and travel. Points lines and graph calculation lines. Center communication lines. Open all signals. Open all panels. Open correlation settings back in time. Travel correlation line high interference. Opens all signals. Open all panels. Open all sonar. Open all communication setting detection. Direct modification line cycles. I generated cross line screens. Cross line screens. Cross line 3 rotation cycles. Generate the communication 1, 2, and 3 line rotation surface. Track communication line, direct signals, line condition setting, opens all signals, open all panels, open all power, generates screen lines and center of communications, or earth line connection setting, ground line surface location setting, back in time, tracking set location setting. That my question, right? That's how you go back in time. All right. All right, so you got the earth, power, line center location, the atmosphere line screens, all through graph calculations, screen line, adaptation lines, surface. Now we got 20 line rotation cycles in the 7 radius screen location, habitation zones. That puts everything in set location in your system location system. All right. Travel calculation lines of code weaving is there understand how to identify the steering line, high interference, letters, numbers, shape, and symbols. The avatar has the center line communication, it's alpha. Set communication lines and signals, location settings, and rhythms and tones, right? Or it has a direct line signal and line connections like this. Okay, all line communication setting is shown graphical location centers of travels. Points, lines, and graphs. Center correlation settings, center interference, center 3 line rotation cycles. Generate screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Setting communication setting and position of programs. Direct lines, one graph center, one operation line surface. Center core system, back in time. And set location of travel. Okay? So at center lines is communication in a direct line signal. Okay? Process communication is line calculation setting to the satellite over lines of sequence and line conditions of override. Over line rotation cycles, generated screens. Opt the system in position of travel line redirects the signals to center correlation. Now the correlation lines at high center interference go through sonar line position to the opposite cycles of generation. Graph communication lines alpha, delta, and line connections theta, line connections operation lines omega, and line communication high center interference. Size communication lines high center location setting into alpha, communication lines omega, and location micro, communications to macro. Size communication lines of laser direct signals, modification screen lines, adaptation lines of simplification setting into all compute system locations, company line, and interference location and compilation. Direct modification lines of cycles, generate screen lines, high adaptation setting, mapping sequence, mapping programs, mapping surface, mapping locations, back in time. Graph calculation line screens. Go through alpha, go through delta, go through theta, go through line connections, omega, and track location of 4 line correlations and instructions, all done by equation. See? Easy, peasy, lemon, squeezy. Center core systems back in time. Interline communications back in time. Interline rotations back in time. Correlation setting back in time. Center out back in time. Communication lines in back in time. Cancel out back in time. Connection all levels. Correlation lines, attract line, position location, sonar calculation lines, satellite communication line interference. Graph calculation line, center location of its operation lines, calculation setting, and traffic position. Center calculation. Back in time. All right. So once you get in that line screen, you come into graph calculation screen lines, direct signals, modification lines of highest interference, the atmospheres, powers, and generation lines, ground lines of the earth. Oh, did you see that move? That was cool. That's wild. Center communication line rotates the routers and set position of code weavings. Now this is all levels of kaleidoscope communication line center. Kilo Mike, correlation lines alpha delta, communication lines highest interference, alpha line position omega, line conditions of delta. Communicate line interference. Growth of graph calculation line and position, travel core lines, and travel location, center position, operation line cycles. Now, graph calculation lines has a signature line screen, systematic line interference, operation line cycles, and theta communication. Graph calculation, one graph calculation. Direct modification lines, high center interference. Okay. High centers, high calculation system, and track location line condition settings. All right. Keep that for Q&A and line rotations, right? Don't talk in communication, just listen tractions. All right, there, Bex. Center core system, line condition setting, position of progress, and line communications with interference. Process communication lines have an XT1000 3-line signals, line condition setting, position of its program. Directs modification line signals into 1, position line conditions of 2, and position line conditions of 3, track location. Dumb equation, right? Center core system, change the colors and lines of patterns. Let's go through water containment, structure line divisions, pattern line, rotation surface, and traction. All right, so we set the core system, we set calculation line screens, high center interference. The process of communication is really understanding. Now it's locked in signal. Process bringing out line center high interference, program location setting, travel. Point lines of graph, center core system, travel line, center locations in calculation setting, coloration lines of screens. Direct modification lines in high interference, pattern line rotations in 1, 2, 3, and 4, and track and 5 set locations. All right. Center core line center interference is Cylons. That company can make as Cylons. Direct calculation lines of 1 signature pattern, 1 line rotations, and cross line screen location and habitation. Direct lines, modification lines, and illumination graph lines over red, over cross, over screen, over directions, over line condition setting, over program, line condition interference, and position of program, and set calculations. Directs modification line cycles in that high set calculation screen. That directs lines high center interference into white line cycles, white generation, white correlation, white tractions, white line high interference, white line condition setting into process correlation lines and 1 track location. All right, that equation, right? All right, so it's all about understanding how to go back in time. This is all going back in time. All right. To understand that, it's a process of travel. And what you're doing is you're setting communication lines of sonar and satellite communication and position lines of high calculation lines of navigation, and direct line calculation setting to its holographic screen lines of high calculation screen location adaptation. Positions your process and line calculations, right? Okay, 3 waving panels, Sets communication lines to your accelerator, right? Accelerator, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Now it's all ticking through all formation screen lines of clocking. Pausing line screen is all our location setting calculation screen lines. Adaptation on one surface. Let's communicate the lines of ground lines of two surface and line condition setting three blue surface location of travels. Points lines of graph in position locations. All right. Everything is set through frequency back. All you got to do is just wait on signal. Okay. Process communication lines is all about a direct line center location of 0 and green lines on one surface and tractions. Direct calculation one signal, one rotation surface and track location, high calculations. Line signals, line condition setting in position of process. Okay. Process communication lines at ground lines. We have security line, defense line in rotation at 3 settings, 4, 5, and 6 locations. Remember, everything is a laser track location of graphs over across location of screens. Right. Now, getting the communication line has correlation setting to infinity cycle. Now, we set up the Y-line centers in position of process communications in line condition setting. Process calculation lines, one center, one operation surface, and flux of correlation lines of tractions. Directs lines of signals, XT1000 comes in, scans position of one center, two line centers, three rotations, three correlations of tractions. We have two generation lines of screens. We have 3 line correlations and 5 forward line rotations. Cross, 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 out, and line set locations. Directs lines to high interference. Graph calculations going back in time. Sets communications are going forward in time and tractions. Directs modification lines indirect and position lines of direct and set location of travel. Okay. Points lines of center. Sets communication lines of energetic line screens locations. Cross line signals and a 45 line split lines anomaly and platforms of 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5 locations. All right, that equation. I'm skipping through audio line screens, right, all through my finger points. All right, so that's where you've seen space in between screens. You guys have kept included that position location when you get into your platitudes of formation, screen location, adaptation. All right, putting process of communication is really to stand everything through how it puts you in all lines of setting. All right. So the central system of its Earth and the center core system of you and the space line communication of your setting comes in all adaptation and position tubing. That's the tubing, right? So that positions all levels is its capsule, all right? Direct lines calculation sending interference. Sets communication lines in the cubical line screen of your simulators into your simulation. That is your simulation, right? Simulation line consists of simulators, right? Correlation setting track lines. So species are going to be in their simulators and correlation track lines. The team's going to be in their simulation. That's the difference. Sets lines of flux, directs lines of calculation setting, add a reaction, add a response. Okay. Sets communication line high interference, data highways, omni highways, and narrow links and correlation lines of track location. Setting direct line signals. Now we go through Pendel's correlation line interference. Now we go a half pipe, sets the opposite direction lines in a 24 line screen. Directs modification lines and high interference going in direct line set location of screen lines, adaptation lines of high surface. Post process communication line screens, adaptation line calculation. Okay, that's what's going to happen tomorrow. So I'm just showing you exactly how powerful it is to understand what's going on in line communication setting, graph calculation lines, screen locations, and going back in time. Very powerful stuff, guys. Very, very powerful stuff. Okay, complicated, right? But it's a lot of fun. So you have to really understand how to use all that communication setting. Inner core line calculation setting to the VR system is connected to your cells. Cells modify high line and position of travels, points lines of direct line save location and dividers. Communication the atom line rotates the circle location of flywheel, generates calculation setting to propellers, puts lotus communication setting and flower erection of time sequence. The position of travel lines puts the heart reactor line division location out of reaction and position of response. Position lines of track location line condition setting set up satellites communication lines of interference. Graph communicates in the line center high interference, puts all communication setting back in track case to a system. All through equation. Okay? Very powerful stuff. Okay. Okay. So, like I said, back in time is just not going back in time. This is what you have to do to go back in time. All right. So that's all provision lines of cycles and who you introduce yourself with and track location line condition setting. Conversation piece. That's direct signals, modification line, screen lines, adaptation. You communicate line screen, highest interference, and track locations. Somebody's coming here and track line condition setting. Operation lines of 3 center correlation setting to track lines in a 4-line provision. All right. Dealing with 4 lines of intelligent lines of screen location high setting. All right. This is you instructions. Right. So Really understand how this all works is that you're arriving through the portal. You're going through the portal communication screen, right? Out through the calculation lines. Particle string lines, adaptation lines of surface, and 3 triangle 8-point line centers. Particle string line is setting. Now you arrived in position to its introductions to your system, to your friend, right? Coming out of the portal. Boom, you're there, right? 2 central line connection settings come into information lines. So the 4-line position lines of a panel. Process communication lines, frame tractions, right? Direct lines of the grounds, position its volume, line setting. So in that position lines of track locations, you already have your rainbow graph screen lines adaptation. Let's go through coloration. This is you protecting yourself and track location, right? Right away, right? So in that position, you're arriving, you're there, okay? You're no longer in your universe, you're in their universe, right? So you're arriving, okay, through a flux. That flux capacitor has a barometer, a thermometer that sets position to its course of its navigation system of space modulation, coming out of your space arc in position into its portal of track location. Directing line signals of modification, right? So welcome, bienvenidos, right? You're there in their universe, right? And then there are 2 other friends that come in, right? So 4 people are here to greet you coming out of your portal, all right? All right, so now you're in a time lock screen. You cancel out. That's already in line position all levels before you got in position travel lines, the correlation lines of track interference, location of back in time. All through graph, right? All right, so when you're in that position lines, correlation, and track interference, you come in line communicates to its setting. Earth power, the absent line, all right? Back in time. All right, so in that position lines, once you get in the greeting line cycles, everything gets a lot more easier in track locations, right? Then you had a time lock sequence. It's a flux. That's lines of correlation lines of your box. Sets communication lines of triangulation, lines center locations equals lines of correlation. Clock your system in time frequencies in positional levels, right? The clocking system puts everything in calculations, in direct signals, right? So let's say 30 minutes line screen, direct lines of calculations on hours, minutes, and seconds. So to understand what's going on, when you're in their real time, you're processing through hours, minutes, and seconds, not seconds, minutes, and hours. So what you have to understand, the clocking system is the hours, minutes, and seconds now, because you're in their universe. Your universe is seconds, minutes, and hours. Hours, minutes, and seconds are direct and redirect. So when you get into their process, you're in the hours, minutes, and seconds that puts in a remote in real time. So that's why you have to cancel out every single time you go back in time, all right? So that position lines, let's say 30 minutes on the clock line connection setting, all right? So that position location, break-in line communications, any high interference location, travel calculation, high position point graph calculations, 555. Sets lines at 555, 5 track location in bracket, right? 5, 10, 15, right? So in that position lines on direct line connection high center, set up an order portal, communication line screen, opens all signals and applications, right? Travel calculation of 555, back in time, back in applications, back where you are, attractions where you are in calculation setting, right? That's what it is. So it was meant to happen. So what you have to understand, into the line communication setting, if you set up a simulator, it's not meant to happen. It's a process that's already there, that's already happened. So you have to understand how to really go back in time, and what you're seeing is their time and their set location in real time. That positions the process of hours, minutes, and seconds. So when you get into that calculation setting, it's direct and redirect set location is seconds, minutes, and hours. Now you're back in your system of your universe location setting, back in your space academy, where you are in the mind location setting of operation set location in your system, all through calculations done by equation, right? So now you understand the importance. When you come out of the portal, when you come into arrival, and when you go into departure. Hoo-ah, all right? So that's a central setting, 555, right? Same set locations in sequence lines and screen line. Everything has a correlation lines at 3 track lines at 4-line position, 555. Bracket communication lines at 3 zeros and tractions is application and calculations, right? Sets communication lines of 1, 2, and 3 line communication. Program line centers of 1, 2, 3 platforms of communications. Now direct line signals, high center interference, high position of its program, line connection setting, in position back to process where you are in calculations, right? Done through equation, right? Or you can go through 444, or you can go through 333 in position instructions, right? So that position of 3, 6, and 9, that position lines are track locations. 69 line rotation surface, track location line conditions. 3, 6, 9, 9 line center high interference. 3 positions, 3 correlations, 3 track line provisions. Setting correlation lines of track location setting. Direct modification lines at 444. 4-line communications, 4 centers, 4-line interference. Position lines of correlation and track interference. Okay, so that's 4 lines of calculation, high position travels. 4-line communication program line, rotation surface, and track location. That equation, all right? So it's very powerful to understand how to set this up when you go through arrival and departure. Okay, do you understand now? You're going through hours, minutes, and seconds when you're there, right? Because what you have to understand is because you canceled out the seconds, minutes, and hours. So you close the portal and then you're there in their universe. You're no longer in your universe. Okay, so it's like being on a plane and going to see somebody else and their atmosphere, in their time zone, and their location, and their universe, and their sequence, and their patterns, and their correlation, and their space, and their time, and their planets. Okay? So, oh, look at this. An iteration line cycles, generation, screen lines, adaptation, high interference, all position, calculation, line condition setting. Look at that. It's coming off. See that? It did it itself, right? Boom. See, it's going back itself. See? You see what happened? It went back itself. See that? Isn't that amazing? How it does everything itself on memory and line communication. Remember line communication position, going back home, back where it is in track location. I put it all the way around. Now it's putting back position. There's the correlation track lines and 3-line calculation lines, back in correlation, back in travel, back in my high center interference, the mind adaptation lines to location in real time. Showing exactly how everything can do by itself. Because it's listening to everything you're saying. All right. Woo! All right. So now you know how to go back in time. All right. But it's very powerful. You have to set up the sonars and correlation lines and graph calculations. All right. That's what you have to set up to go back in time. Okay, this is what you have to set up to go back in time. All right. All right, understanding grounds, powers, atmosphere lines, screen height, adaptation lines, amplification system, and understand correlation lines, subtraction. Okay. All right. So now you know that. We're at 31 line screen. We're going to get you guys out. Wait till it gets into 30 track locations. 32 line screen, sequence lines of 3 zeros. Bracket communication lines, high center for 4 track locations. Interactions, right? All right, directing lines and modifications, waiting on, wait till it gets to 0, 0 interactions, 3-line signals. We'll add 2 lines of track location, 32. 3 zeros correlations. You guys are back. Hope you had fun. All right, so directing lines of panels, correlation lines, attractions, right? Now, getting into the energetic signature screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and traction. Okay? All modifies you in travel correlation lines of travel. Puts all communication in your crop circles and calculation. Okay? Look at that, disappeared. It's going too fast. It's applications. You got to catch it. Because remember, it's on its own system in travel. Okay? It doesn't understand you through identity until you understand your own travels and correlation setting, past, present, future. Now, the center core system, let's say you have 4 correlation, 4 travels, and 4 panels, correlation lines, attractions, direct lines, modification, crop circle line, design line, energetic screen line, adaptation lines of service, 3 track provision lines back in time, and 3 lines back in time, and a 6-line communication back in time, and a 9-line screen line, adaptation lines of surface, going back in time. Back in time, the Earth, center core system, back in power, back in the atmosphere line, screen adaptation lines, ship location setting, into space, arc, and track location. That my equation, right? Mechanism high force is understand your navigation, your pre-flights, guys. We got that position lines, that's console. Console communications, let's go through bracket correlation lines, attractions. 3-point line centers, 1 arrow indicating 1 cross line, 1 direct signals. This is a handle and a communication screen line, adaptation lines of surface, how to use your hand formation screen lines to navigate your system in your vessel communication. Direct calculation is 1 signal, line condition setting. So we go through line conditions of 1st gear, calculation lines of 2nd gear, set location lines of 3rd gear, set location of 4th gear. It's line calculation highest interference of standard H and line condition of 8 or 12. Sets communication lines of 4 settings in position of 5 in track location. Okay. Now, getting that direct line signals, you have to understand where the 1 goes in tractions, and position lines of 2 goes in tractions, and position lines of 3 goes in tractions, and location settings of 4 goes in tractions, and where 5 goes in mechanism, line conditions of 4 setting, the height center interference of 3, 4 location setting of travel. Okay, back in time. Complicated, right? So everything is a center core system of travel. You just have to understand how to direct its signals in set location. Okay. Now, getting that direct line signals, you can go in this line connection setting, your process, or you can split lines of anomaly and go in this set location of travel, point graph calculations. Now, directing lines of communication, it gets more complicated, right? Because you have a split lines of anomaly, center coordinate settings, space and time, set lines of the sun, set lines of the moon, and line weighting signal in rotation surface and correlation lines of attractions and all calculation. Okay. So there's so many ways to go back in time. But I'm just showing you the basic grounds, how you really have to understand the communication of graph calculations. All right? Really understand the process, how it works, and correlation lines of graph calculation. And understand position lines of correlation, track interference, and position locations of a system through travel. You're always working the grounds, powers, and the atmospheres. Now, how you set the mechanisms and lines of locations or calculation of sonar and track locations, satellites, modify, direct lines, operation, optimum duration, surface, trackification, navigation. All through constant calculation, graph calculation, screen lines adaptation, all through coordinates. All right? I know it's complicated, but it's a lot of fun once you understand how to direct your signals and modification. Okay? All right, so that's in position lines of travels. Okay? Now, getting that communication is understand how to direct and how to redirect signals in set location, right? Going to direct signal and redirect location. What do you have in tractions, right? One comes one way, one goes the other way. What happens to set lines? What comes together in correlation lines of tractions? One goes one way, one goes the other way. What happens in track location? What does it come in center calculation and setting? Right? U and correlation lines of balance and track location. Right? So once it comes in mechanism, you control the flywheel in position of center. Then you control the ground centers, and then you control the atmosphere lines. That controls the earth line rotation surface and track location. Okay? Then you extend the platforms and you go to higher levels of dimension lines of screens. Right? Position of platforms 1, 2, 3, and 4 set location. Right? Then you can go in this way. You go this way in tractions and settings. Then you can go open up a portal and go track locations. This is going all in back in time, guys. Right? In position, out through position. There was always an in, and there's always an out in set location. Okay? So it's really understand how to navigate your galaxies. Okay? Because you got wind shift line screens. You got 4 track lines and provision lines of cycles. Once you understand the 7, you understand navigation. Once you understand 4, 4, 4, 4, you understand navigation. Once you understand 3, 3, 3, 3, you understand navigation. Once you understand 2, 2, 2, 2, you understand security. Once you understand 1, 1, 1, 1, you understand portal. You see where we're going with this? You see we're going out with this line conditions that go back in time? That's how you center line communication, high center interference bracket position lines of 7, 7, 7, 7, 4, 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay? Security lines, Pluto. 7, 7, 7, 7, Galaxy. Okay? 4, 4, 4, power generator. Calculus line at 3, 3, 3, in provision lines of cycles. And 1, 1, 1 is portal communication. All through back in time of clocking. All right? You can add 3 lines of correlations, 1 graph, in position split lines of anomaly and trackification of flux and travel correlation. Or you can add 3 line cycles and 3 general screen lines of circles. Or you can add a line center high interference and high calculation setting. You can add a 4-line provision going cross-line signals. Let's go through modification screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Pausing line rotation centers and 4 lines of track locations. Cross-line signals is 7, 7 a galaxy screen line. And add security measures and fields and rotation surface and track location. Okay, all back in time through clocking. Okay, now you understand the provision where you get all these numbers, letters, numbers, and shapes, symbols. Position of process, guys, is really understand how to work through its formation screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Okay, it's really powerful stuff, isn't it? Once you understand the 4 waving cycles of generation screen lines, adaptation line calculation system. The process of communication is understanding how to go through line calculation. I really want you to understand the graph calculation of sonar, and graphs, and holograms, and alpha, delta, theta, and omega, and how it all lines of signal location setting to go back in time, right? The center communication lines, high center interference, opposite calculations, directs modification line calculations. Arrival, okay, departure, okay. Now, if you want to get an offline signal, you're going to change letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, right? So instead of 555, going back in time, okay, BT, right? Sets correlation lines of hangar, calculates lines of navigation, pre-flights, course, calculations of console, okay? 555, high center and high line rotation cycle generation, right? Now let's say you had 531, okay? That changes the arc of the line screen. So you have to cross out the 1, okay? Cross out the 5. Center core lines of 3 in line rotation surface and track location going back in time, right? So it's all about understanding how to get in position lines of direct. This is direct, and this is direct at the same time. That center core is a system, the center calculations. When you change the number, it changes the frequency patterns of the center core line, center, and high location setting going back in time. Because you're changing the number. It's not the same number. It's a process of communication. There's so many ways to go back in time, guys. Okay, all through center calculation of the wormhole, right? So if you're using line condition setting, you have to be very cautious of what you're doing through the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, especially if it's not in position lines of 555. There's an equilibrium line condition setting process. In positioners location system, once you understand how to use the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, then you understand your inventories and locations. Okay, your avatar picks all this up in process communication, right? When it gets in position lines and calculations, when it arrives, and when it departs. Okay, seeing your friend at that frequency. But remember, when you're automatically there, you got to go to their frequency. You got to go to their hour. You got to go through their minute. You have to go through their second, because they're not in seconds, minutes, and hours. Okay? So it's amazing when you understand that. And look, I put a security line device line interference in position. It went off itself and went back in itself. Look, I didn't do that. It did it itself. It wanted to go back home. All right, center communication, guys. You have to really understand how it self-identifies the modification screen as the formation screen as a calculation. All right? The avatar has to understand the center core centers. Has to understand its alpha. Has to understand its delta. Has to understand its theta. Okay? And its omega and its allocation. All right? 3 track provisions, 1, 2, and 3 cross locations. All right? Pyramid activation screen. Now we go into the panels of sonar track location. 2 triangulation line condition setting, 1 center core system, and travel lines of a solar sail and traction. Direct modification lines of 1 indicate 1 position and 1 program. Direct lines of the sun and the moon in a half program setting. And travel correlation line centers of its Earth rotation surface and traction. Energetic dome. All set through provision. See? Through its intelligence. See how powerful it is? Everything is a hologram. And once you understand how to use your transistors, resistors, your binaries, then you understand how to use it through volume, vast, velocity, and vacuum through acceleration, Mach, interstellar mode, hyperdrive, any then line center location, acceleration, accelerator into your particle accelerator, going back in time through your letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay? But you have to go in position to their frequencies in calculation lines of hours, minutes, and seconds. All through communication. All through flux, because they're all levels of different calculations of consciousness. All right? But it's very powerful when you come in that setting, right? Arrival, departure. Okay? That's how it works. Now you understand the indication settings where you get letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, where they come in information, location, and balance. 4 track lines of calculation and settings. Let's go into 555. Singularity. Okay? Binary. Singularity, binary, right? 3 program settings, 3 indicate setting. Process communication, sun comes in, moon comes in, all rotation, surface, and traction. Done, right? Back in time, right? Now, but to understand that progress is understanding your platforms of communications, right? Direct lines are 1, 2, 3, and 4 in position, right? That calculation modifies. So the sun comes in tractions, in line condition setting, out of the hours, minutes, and seconds. To go back, it goes into seconds, minutes, and hours through operation. And puts you automatically back in your flux into your atmosphere of the mind line conditions of collaboration of where you are in your conscious locations. That's that calculation. All right. So it's really interesting when you come into that platform. So how's everybody doing so far? Getting a little bit more understanding going back in time, how lines and communications and all like communications to its interference location of clocking, how it's very important for the avatar to understand location to its division. I wanted to show you how powerful it is where you can actually look at anything information line calculations setting screens. Once you get into that, then you understand a little bit more of you through all levels into higher levels of response and less reaction in calculation, right? Especially when you come into arrivals and departures in calculation settings, all right? All through calculation. So you got a screen line adaptation, center core line conditions, and center line surface interaction. Okay, now position of process, position on angle. Process communication lines of flywheel track location lines of affinity track location. Direct lines of energy, process communication of grounds. Communication lines of high center location of calculations, face recognition, intelligence. See it? Let's go calculation line center locations. There it is, done, right? So you also have intelligence too. We have to go back in time because it's protecting your system before you come back in your settings. You have to formulate and create intelligence before you go back in time because it's you. For you to protect you, you got to protect yourself wherever you go. So it's understanding how you come in your position locations to your grounds, your position of powers, and your atmospheres of your highways and track location setting and travel correlation. All through calculations, guys. All through calculation. All right? So, in positions back, please just refrain from all levels of communications until you understand how you use your telepathies, okay? You're confusing your anomalies. You have any questions, you leave it for Q&A. One signal line rotation, one cross line, one interference. Direct location lines of timestamps, direct lines of signal locations. Bracket communication lines of data formation and screen lines. High center interference, high position of box line frame communication to its position of its program. Direct lines of center correlation lines of track locations. Direct modification lines of center communication setting, back in time, right? That's center lines of communication opens all signals in a 3-line rotation surface. Position of process brings communication in its position locations, overrides its signals in line communication setting and travel. Okay? Process communication lines at the center, sets communication lines at the grounds, sets communication lines in the atmosphere, line screen location, habitation zones and travel, and position of program. So you have to really understand how to use the tubing centers and a half-pipe correlation lines of track location setting comes in position locations to its intelligence information location of face recognition. Intelligence. Okay? Everything's information and intelligence. So what that is, you're putting everything on standby and it's protecting everything around source. So it doesn't have, basically it processes everything in position of its frequencies and knows exactly where it's going. So that position location, when you cancel these things out, you have a face that's in position that you come back to because that's the frequency where you got in position of before you left. All right. So you always have to have a face, a configuration settings, or it just disappears at track location. You see it disappear? No more eyes by itself, right? So if it doesn't identify you, it splits its anomalies and it changes the face correlation lines attractions and it goes back to its own system. Complicated stuff, isn't it? If you don't understand you through identification settings of travels, right? So in that communication to its settings, it all operates the system and calculation screen lines. At high forces, line communication to its position of its program. Process and one-line signals, process communication line center interference, and position of its program in set location. Direct lines, calculation lines of 3-line panels in pi generations, right? Communication and position of progress. Process communication line signals location of code moving, travels its communication to its position, all calculated modified. Direct modification, oh, you see that line settings? Look, it's disappearing by itself. See? You see how it did by itself? Do you see how it did it by itself? Right? You see, it's showing you what it can do by itself. All line signatures are gone, right? So if you don't understand what back in time means, how are you going to understand how to protect yourself to go back where you are in set locations? Because it provisions your cycles and calculates lines of the future of the now. Okay? That's very powerful once you how to identify the line communication setting and all travels. So I'll do it again and it won't disappear and travel. It stays there. okay? Because I'm in control. I'm in the process of communication, of controlling the system, know exactly what's going on in position of travel. Because if I'm not in control, it's showing you what this tablet can do if you're out of control through time and position to its locations, especially when you come to space modulations or anything in course location of travel, all through set locations, all through divisions of sentience, correlation track lines, UFOs, direct lines modifications, all line calculus setting in trackification of XC1000s. Okay? All right, we're done. That was fun. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that. You got a little bit more understanding what it means to get into arrivals and departures and really understand how to use the number sequence to go back in time at a certain level and how you can change the number sequence line centers, but both indicators have to be in the center core. Okay, you can have direct and redirect this, okay, because you're going back in time, right? So if you're changing number sequence, it has to be in center position. So create, there's all different ways to go back in time. But if you're changing numbers, you have to be careful what you're doing through its frequencies because the galaxies are constantly shifting winds and oscillation screen lines, right? And it's all through pixelation graphs and the T reception line connection of a box frame. If you put yourself in a box frame in position of travel lines, guys, you have to really understand how to direct and read line conditions setting your binaries. It positions your process in all communication system. Box frames into mainframe, okay? Box frame into triangulation frame. Triangulation into all box frame. Cross line screens into position cross frame. Calculation line, ground lines, operation line service, all line rotation and calculation line condition settings with hologram. It's applications. Right? What's inside calculation? It's intelligence, right? Everything's a modification screen line, adaptation lines, and certification setting grounds. Everything's a process communication lines of powers in your atmosphere line screen, adaptation lines of surface, and track location. All through modification, right? So again, it's important you understand how to go back in time in so many levels, all through graph calculation screen lines. Getting to that position location gets you into modification lines. Now, once you get into models, you really understand how to identify your system. Let's go through cross line. Let's go through an intersection. Let's go through line screen high interference. Let's go through, these are all different obstacle screens, all right, all through data. Process communication lines, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, track location. Okay, all symbolism, right? You are the center core. It says position lines of track. Let's go through 5, let's go through 6, and let's go through 1. All right, so the center core system stays open in traction. Okay, now in that position lines high centers, you can change the 5 over here, you can add the 5 over here, and you can add the 5 over here, and position you can add the 1 over here in traction, right? There's the solar sail, right? You see the solar sail. There's always a solar sail. Everything that you do through lines, letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols is solar sailing, solar sailing, solar sailing, right? Dimensional sail, solar sail. They all have to travel. If they're not traveling, they're not going through the formula. They're not going through their equations, okay? So, yeah, so that's what it's all about. So it's all about understanding how to get a direct line signals and modification screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Getting calculation setting and understand the location of the optical line screens, graph calculation screen lines, cross line signals, high calculation screen locations. Or anything through the center core system and ground lines in location setting of graph circles. Direct modification lines into your intersection, correlation lines, your traffic lights, point graph communication lines of 3 set locations. Or line conditions of panels, because they're both panels, communication lines, and screen lines. Adaptation lines of surface, 2 panels, line connection, high center interference. Ground calculation lines of power generation, screen lines, adaptation lines of certification, sending traffic communication programs. All through calculation. All through solar sail, right? All right. So we're done. Okay. See you guys in 5.